Gather round, friends and strangers, and listen in on my tale of infamy. uh, I'm Rumblebeat. I'm a round little kitty from the big city, and today I have a story about a story about a story. But before I begin, just a quick disclaimer. The main incident that this story revolves around does include some questionable parenting decisions, and I'm not going to make any excuses for that or anything, but I will just hope that you keep in mind that this story happened like 30 years ago, something like that. And while I will acknowledge that some not so great decisions were made, my pa and I are amicable as of recording, at least. And, you know, we have an understanding, and largely that understanding revolves around if I tell an anecdote about my childhood and he comes out of it looking like a total ass, them's the breaks. So, just so you know going in, I'm not completely ignorant to the blatant mistakes that were made, and in fact, that is kind of the point of the story. But hey, well, with that taken care of, let's get into it. So, because this is my first story time video, allow me to lay some groundwork with a little bit of Rumble lore. So, I come from a blended family. What that means is, at the time of this incident occurring, our family unit was my mumble, my paw, my 3 older sisters who, were from another litter, Cloud, Crackle, and Thunder. Then there was me, Rumble, and my little brother, Skipper. And back then, we didn't live in the big city, but we lived in a city, though it was the type of city that very much used to be a small town and still kind of held that small town vibe. And what I mean by this is everybody was born at the same hospital, everybody went to the same schools, and there was maybe 5 degrees of separation between you and a perfect stranger on the street. Guaranteed, if you spoke to that person for 20 minutes, you would find out that somebody that they're related to knows somebody who used to go to college with somebody. And yeah, it was one of those places. So it was a city by population standards, but deep down inside was very cozy. Let's put it that way. So in our little city, we had what could very generously be referred to as an amusement park. And when I say amusement park, what you might be picturing is like Six Flags. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm also not talking about like a county fair type situation with many rides and things to do. This was this was Action Park. This was a rich guy building stuff on his property to charge people for the entertainment. This place took up probably the same amount of space as your average car dealership takes up. What they had was a little go-kart track, a little man-made pond with bumper boats in them that nobody rode. They had a little roller coaster. Then they had the recreation area, which was like a cafeteria that, sold pizza and poutine and whatever. And then they had a handful of video game cabinets for kids to play and waste their money on. And normally when we would go, it'd be all 7 of us. And I was obsessed with that roller coaster. It was the only thing I cared about. And I would make my mumble go up with me. I would make my sisters all go up with me, one after the other. The thing that you have to understand about this roller coaster was it was very exciting for me as a 5-year-old, but it was the kind of roller coaster where you have to climb like 5 or 6 flights of stairs to get to the top because it's powered by gravity. So it would take you down the length of it, and it maybe lasted a minute and a half of ride time. And then you would reach the bottom and they would make you get out. And that's when the poor teenagers that worked there over the summer would have to grab it by the seatbelt that straps you in, which was just like literally a seatbelt out of a vehicle. And they would drag it down the track until it got back to where the conveyor belt would take it up to the top. Um, so as you can imagine, I would get maybe 1 or 2 rides out of one family member, and then I would have to go to the next one. So Mumble would get sick of climbing the stairs, and so I would move to Cloud, and then Cloud would get sick of it, and then I would move to Crackle, and so on and so forth. But, we that it worked because, everybody wanted to at least ride it once or twice, and I was just the insane little kid who wanted to ride it 10 or 12 times. Well, things were a little different on this fateful day. Instead of all 7 of us being there, it was just me and Skipper and my paw. And keep in mind that Skipper and I were still very young. Our tails still came to a point. So, we couldn't be left unsupervised to go run around, do whatever we wanted. And naturally, my obsession with the roller coaster got old pretty quickly. I mean, not for us. I was having the time of my life just going up and down the roller coaster over and over again. And Skipper, he didn't have any complaints. He was perfectly happy to do the same thing I was doing, whatever it was. As for my paw, it was a lot of stairs. And I imagine after 3 or 4 times, he was pretty much spent on the roller coaster. So, he tried to negotiate with us some other activity that we might do. Not that the bumper boats were ever an option. Nobody plays on the bumper boats. That was nobody does. The bumper boats area is where you go feed the ducks. So what it boils down to is he was trying to get us to ride on the go-karts, which I had absolutely no interest in whatsoever. I had never ridden a go-kart. I had no earthly desire to, and it just made sense to me to just continue doing the thing that I knew that I was enjoying, which was the roller coaster. And so there was a back and forth, both sides being equally as stubborn as the other. But ultimately, he deployed his secret move, which was that if I didn't agree to ride the go karts, he would drive us home and we would not get to ride on anything else for the rest of the day. So I conceded on the condition that if I didn't like riding the go-karts, that I would be allowed to go back to riding the roller coaster, and he agreed. So we make our way on over to the go-karts and we get ourselves situated, and we were small, but we were evidently big enough that we were allowed our own cart each. And as soon as I get strapped in, I start getting nervous because, oh no, what the hell am I supposed to do in this machine, right? I've never done this before. And the kid that's running the attraction, he's doing his best. He's giving me the rundown of all the rules and which one's the gas pedal, which one's the brake, and everything. But I'm getting overwhelmed, right? And I start having doubts, and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I don't really want to. And my dad gets frustrated because he knows that if he can't get me to do this, we have to go home. And that means that he has to go home too. So he needed me to toughen up and get used to the fact that I was about to drive a vehicle. So he got out of his go kart and came over to me, and with a teeming frustration that was kind of broiling under the surface, he lets me know just how easy it is. And he says probably the stupidest thing he could have said in that very moment. He says, "You'll be fine. It's easy. It's just like Mario Kart." And in the short term, that was, in fact, the perfect thing to say to me because instantly my anxieties were alleviated. And I thought, oh, okay, that's easy. I'll just do it like Mario Kart. But have you ever watched a 7-year-old play Mario Kart? If you have, then you might know what's about to happen. And so, what I did once the light turned green and we had been given the signal to go was I pushed my little paw into the gas pedal as far as I could, and I did not let go. I did not let go when I came upon the first turn. I did not let go when I started to lose control of my steering. I did not let go when I hit the tire barrier around the track and bounced off of it, careening into the chain link fence on the other side. I did not let go of the gas until I had already firmly merged the front of my cart with the chain link fence. The next thing I knew, I was being pulled out of the cart by the employee that was working there. I was quickly asked if I was okay, and I admitted that my neck hurt a little bit, not from whiplash or anything, but the seatbelt of the go kart had actually friction burned a little line into my neck. I was promptly escorted back to my father, and we were both informed that I would not be allowed to ride the go karts ever again, and that we would have to leave. And with the adrenaline still pumping through my tiny body after this near death experience, I did not think twice before looking up to my father and saying, "Can I ride the roller coaster now?" And let me tell you right now, I don't think I've ever heard my pa's voice ever reach a pitch quite so high as when he said to me, "No, you may not ride the roller coaster." And then, desperate to not lose out on his one opportunity to enjoy himself this afternoon, he redirected his ire to the supervisor of the ride and quickly intimidated this poor boy into reaching a compromise, by which I mean he had convinced him to let me ride in his lap while he drove his go kart so that I would technically not be driving or operating the vehicle in any way. And only then would he peacefully leave the park. uh, and so that's what happened. I got in with him. We did a couple laps and we got out and he said, "There, wasn't that fun?" And my snarky ass said, "No, not really." And yeah, we left as instructed. And that is the story of how I won an argument by crashing a vehicle. um, but that's not the end of the story. Because as you can imagine, this was a bit of a formative event in my mind. This stuck for quite some time, and I have told the story to many a friend and acquaintance. The second part of this story happens much, much later, when I was in my 20s and I had just finished college. By this point, I had already moved away from this small town and then moved again to the big city. It just so happened that someone else in my class was also from this small city that I was from. And much like I told you before, we in fact had exactly 2 degrees of separation between us. And my sister Crackle happened to be the manager at the store where her childhood friend happened to work. So yeah, we hit it off right away and spent all 3 years in college very close. And the summer of the year that we graduated, she invited me to a birthday party. I happened to be the only person who had to come from out of town to come visit. But it was no big deal because, I mean, I have family there, and, I was able to basically visit with them and then go to the party and whatever. It was no big whoop. But essentially, all of her friends, they were introduced to me as so and so's friend from college. This is Rumble from the big city. So everybody's sitting around the fire shooting the breeze. I had headed inside at some point, either to use the litter box or to grab a soda or something. And as I'm walking back on the radio, which we've been playing classic rock on, a familiar commercial happens to come on. And it is the extremely recognizable theme song for that little amusement park. And so I start singing along because, I mean, we all grew up with it. We all know the song. But by the time I get out to the lawn, I notice everybody's staring my way, and they're all a little perplexed. They go, "How the hell you know that song?" "Well, I grew up here." "Well, Rumble, you didn't tell us you were from here." "Oh, no, yeah, I was born here, and I was here right up until middle school." But seeing as they found this out by way of me singing the theme song to that amusement park, I decided to throw in my little anecdote to see if I could impress anybody. And then everyone went quiet. And one of them pipes up, "That was you?" And I thought, "Oh shit. Do people know about that?" I said, Have you heard that story before?" "Oh, no, no." Apparently, the incident was such a black mark on the history of the park that they had decided to leave the go kart half impaled in the fence so that they could warn anybody and everybody to use their brakes on the turns. They had left it up to set an example as a warning to the general populace. And I had no idea that they had done this. There had been times a few years down the line where my mumble or my sister might have driven me past the place and I would have pointed out the dent in the fence still being there, but I had not known that they left the entire ass cart just sitting there for months because I had totaled it. I had destroyed that thing. And they wanted to make sure that nobody ever did something like that again. And so that was the night that I found out that I was apparently infamous. But once again, this is not the end of the story. There is one more part to this tale, and it has to do with that gap in my knowledge. Because it's funny, right? If this is such a close knit city, and we've only got this one little amusement park in our area, and everybody knows everybody, how is it that I managed to avoid this knowledge? Well, I was visiting with my mumble, and we were driving around the city, and we drove past where my college buddy's house was. And I said, "Oh, Mama, I have to tell you something. The funniest thing happened at that party that I went to." And I told her the story. I told her the story about the story. And she gets confused. She goes, "Rumble, what the hell are you talking about?" I said, "When I crashed the go kart, Mom." She said, "Was this when I was there?" I said, "No, no, no. Dad took us. And it was just me, him, and Skipper." And as I'm going through the motions of explaining this to her, I start to realize what she's realized, and that is that my pa did not tell her a thing. We came back from that little excursion and nobody said a word. And the thing is I don't believe that we were coerced or anything into not saying anything. If you've been around kids or if you remember being a kid, you know that, like, some things, they just don't occur to you to tell anybody because you just kind of assume. You kind of assume that your parents just tell each other everything when you're not around and that they share information, but, not this time. Not this time. And, my mom just looks at me and she goes, "Is that why he told me that you guys didn't like going there anymore?" But no, we Mom, we were banned. We can't go back there. We just kinda sat there, kinda stunned for a bit while we digested the fact that, apparently I had gotten into a major accident, and, by virtue of being pretty much unscathed and also being a dumbass kid, not thinking to talk about the incident to my own mother, she had gone roughly 20 years not knowing that this had even occurred. I will say by this point in the story, with us driving around, they had been separated for a couple years. So, if there had been any comeuppance that he might have gotten as a result of this deception, it was too late. That being said, I am here telling you about his shame, and, if he ever sees this video for some reason, then, he can deal with the embarrassment himself, but, yeah, that's my little story, my little brush with death. One of them, at least. Uh, Moral of the story: don't tell your kids that riding go-karts is like Mario Kart, and, tell your spouse things. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a good one. Bye.